Top 10 La Liga worst teams ever. When we talk about the best teams in La Liga, everyone knows the glories of Barcelona and Real Madrid. But when it comes to the worst, well, few people have ever heard the shameful and miserable stories of Malaga, Sporting Gijon, and Almeria, who are not just some of the most awful teams in La Liga, but in the entire history of the game. Let's get into it. 10. Malaga, 2005-06. We begin at number 10 with the almighty Malaga and their disastrous 05-06 La Liga season. Yes, we all know the glory days of Malaga, when half a decade later they were one of the best teams in Spain, even qualifying for the 2012-13 Champions League season and reaching the quarterfinals. But did you know that Malaga have several seasons in their history that could be easily considered the worst in the Spanish league? The first of these is 05-06. The team was coached by Antonio Tapia, who struggled for consistency throughout the campaign. Malaga's squad included the likes of Juan Rodriguez, Alexis Ruano, Paulo Wanchop, and future legend Jesus Gomez, but they were unable to pull together. The team only managed 24 points from 38 games, with 5 wins, 9 draws, and 24 defeats. Yes, that's the odd part. They had as many points as they lost. Defensively, they were incredibly weak, conceding 68 goals, while offensively, they were one of the third lowest scorers with just 36 goals. So yes, it was definitely a season to forget for Malaga fans. But it wasn't their worst campaign in the league. 9. Osasuna, 2016-17. Unbelievable but true. Osasuna, who have finished top of the league for most of the last 5 seasons and even reached the 22-23 Copa del Rey final, endured one of the most embarrassing campaigns in La Liga history just 7 years ago. Perhaps the most telling sign of their troubles was the fact that they went through a series of managerial changes, starting the season with Enrique Martin, then with Joaquin Caparros, and finally, Peter Vasiljevic. Osasuna's squad included a number of household names, such as striker Sergio Leon, who was the team's top scorer with 10 goals, and other notable names such as Roberto Torres and Oriol Riera. Despite the individual talents of the trio, the team struggled for consistency, especially in defence, which largely foretold their path to the second tier of the Spanish professional football. They managed just 4 wins, 10 draws, and 24 defeats over the course of the season. Defensively, they were horrendous to say the least, conceding, hold on, 94 goals while just scoring 40. By the middle of the season alone, they suffered 2 5-2 defeats and several 3-0 and 3-1 losses. On the plus side, however, they have undergone a massive rebuild, and after just 2 seasons in La Liga 2, they have returned to the top flight and are currently one of the best performing teams in the division. 8. Almeria. As far as the 23-24 season is concerned, La Liga has produced not 1, but 2 of the top worst seasons in La Liga history. And while there was talk in the first half of the season that Almeria could become one of the worst sides in La Liga history, they actually managed to improve dramatically, perhaps largely due to playing without the pressure of knowing they were going to be relegated 10 rounds before the end. However, in an alternative world where La Liga seasons consisted of 24 match days instead of 38, Almeria's 23-24 campaign would surely be at the top of the list. After all, their fans won't be able to forget their nightmare until early February 2024. After a goalless draw with Athletic Bilbao in the 24th round, Almeria became the first team in La Liga history to fail to register a single win in their first 24 matches of the season. Gaisca Garatino's men had collected a miserable 7 points up to that point, but they then stepped up their game, picking up 13 points from their remaining 14 games, including 3 wins, the biggest of which came at Las Palmas, where they lost 1-0 and were thrashed 6-1 by Almeria in the final round. 7. Granada, 23-24 season. And here's the even worse team of the season, which will go down as the 7th worst in the history of La Liga. Granada also finished on 21 points, just like Almeria. But their goal difference was much worse. Despite being the more consistent of the two, they finished with a goal difference of minus 41, having scored 38 goals and conceded 79. They were one of those teams that often venture into both the top flight and the Liga too. They were in the second tier last season, for example, and don't be surprised if they make it back in 23-24. In fact, some of you who follow Spanish football actively would say that they have become a much better team than Almeria, as they have given the Giants serious problems on several occasions this season. Speaking of which, well, Barcelona are probably happy to see them relegated, as the Catalans haven't managed to beat them this season, drawing twice and losing 4 points in the title race to Real Madrid. 6. Malaga, 2017-18. Oh, Malaga, here we go again. As we said not long ago, Malaga's 05-06 season wasn't their worst in the league, as their fans still remember their very difficult campaign with tears in their eyes. Aside from 17-18 being Malaga's worst campaign in the top flight, it was also their last in La Liga to date. It marked the start of their decline as they failed to return to the top flight for the next 5 years and are now not even in La Liga 2. Talking of 17-18, well, they finished with 20 points and were actually not too bad defensively compared to the other teams on our list. They conceded 61 goals, but the 24 scored was simply too little to have a chance of pulling away from 20th place, which held them firm since the first round to the very last. Yes, they bagged their first point in match day 6, finishing with a draw with Athletic Club. As for their attack, those 24 goals on paper could have been a lot more, given Malaga's attacking firepower, which included the likes of current Sevilla man Youssef El-Nesri and former Premier League striker Borja Baston. 5. Granada, 2016-17. Rounding off the top 5 is another Granada team that finished just 1 point below their 23-24 performance, in 20th. Again, as we saw with Malaga, Granada had some very good players in 2016-17 who are now very well known. These include World Cup GOAT Guillermo Ochoa, Man United Academy midfielder Andres Pereira, who was at loan at Granada at the time, and Dimitri Falquir, who is currently at Valencia. So yes, despite all these names, the team had been plagued by instability and had gone through several managers. In terms of their statistics, the team struggled to function as a unit. Granada only managed 4 wins, 8 draws, and 26 defeats. Defensively, they were one of the weakest teams, conceding 82 goals, while their attack was not good enough, scoring just 30 goals. In the end, Granada finished 20th, just beyond the aforementioned Osasuna. 4. Cordoba, 2014-15. Yes, this is one of the forgotten teams in Spanish football, because until recently, Cordoba weren't even in the top 3 leagues in Spain. Yes, that is crazy considering the fact that they were in La Liga 10 years ago. But their only season in the top flight during that period is one to remember, as it was one of the most disastrous. Cordoba finished with 20 points, which was somewhat surprising given that they'd been managed by a very famous name, Barcelona and Spain legend Albert Ferrer. However, after a run of unconvincing results, mainly draws in their first 15 games, Ferrer was replaced, and by the end of the season, Cordoba had 3 coaches in total. The most notable of these was Romanian striker Florin Adoni, who was only 21 at the time, but went on to make a name for himself in Europe, playing for the likes of Brighton and Galatasaray. Cordoba finished the 2014-15 campaign with 3 wins, 11 draws, and 24 defeats, setting a new record for goals scored in La Liga, 22 in 38 games, or just over half a goal per game. They haven't gone up to La Liga since. 3. Elche, 1988-89. And now, with the 3 teams on the podium, 3 teams all from the 20th century, 3 teams whose catastrophic records are yet to be broken. And yes, you may have noticed that unlike our last similar ranking, which was about the worst teams in the Premier League history, which you can watch by clicking the link in the description, the teams on this list so far are all from after 2005, while the rest have all been before the turn of the century. This could be an interesting pattern, showing us that in the past, teams were more adventurous and experimental, trying different things on the pitch, whereas now, football has become a more positional game, where technical stability is the number one priority for coaches. Now, let's get on to the matter. Elche's 1988-89 was undoubtedly the third worst season from a single team in history. They finished bottom with a miserable 15 points, although it must be said that this was in the days when teams got 2 points for a win, not 3. But even with that in mind, Elche was still worse than all the teams mentioned above, winning only 4 games, drawing 7, and losing 27. 2. Logrones, 1994-95. Second on our list is a team that deserves a bit of debate, as it is whether it deserves to be second or first, given that it has similar results to the team we have placed first, which we will look at in a moment. This had been a terrible season for Logrones, who had 2 different coaches at the helm. Julio Raúl Montero Castillo started the campaign as head coach, but then Carlos Aymar came to the rescue. Well, not quite. The changes he introduced failed miserably, and Logrones were relegated with 13 points from 38 games. When it comes to their stats, Logrones were a bit better than the team in first place. They finished the 94-95 season with 2 wins, 9 draws, and 27 defeats, and collected 13 points, which is a bit unfair as the old rules applied in that campaign. A win was worth 2 points instead of 3. So yes, if Logrones had played such a campaign under the current rules, they would have got 15 points instead of 13, which, to be honest, is still a miserable result. But not as miserable as... Number 1. Sporting Gijon, 97-98. And last, but certainly not least, we have Sporting Gijon's disastrous 97-98 season, where they logically finished last, again, having 13 points to their name. They began the campaign under Miguel Montes, who was replaced by Jose Manuel Diaz Navarra, in a bid to turn their fortunes around, but the change in management did not bring the desired results. Like Logrones, Gijon just won 2 of their 38 games, but drew just 7 and lost 29 on their way to relegation. A record in the history of the league. If there's one thing Sporting Gijon fans can cling on to in order to avoid their season being dubbed the worst ever, it's goal difference. Yes, they actually had a better goal difference than Logrones 3 years earlier. Minus 49 for Sporting Gijon in 1998 versus minus 64 for Logrones in 1995. But they are still the 2 worst teams in La Liga history, and their results are hard to beat. However, if you think there's still a team in the Spanish La Liga that can better those results, give us your thoughts in the comments section. And again, as usual, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and jump straight to one of our previous uploads. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you in the next one. Hey GOF, who was worse, Sporting Gijon or Derby County?